primary who are, yes, in South Manchester. Welcome them to Parliament. And later I saw them downstairs. We'll also be joined by the Bluefields Basic School with the students and teachers who will be coming in a little later. All right, members, we have the minutes of the meeting of May 15th. It was the last meeting, right? The meeting of May 15th, which was sent around, which was the meeting we had with the Ministry of Education. And I would ask if there are any corrections. If there are no corrections, could I ask somebody to move for confirmation, Member Daly and Member Stewart. Matters arising from the minutes of the meeting of the last. Yes,
Chairman.
Member Phillips.
Morning. Chairman, you see where which was reported by the CMU, that the programs have not worked as they ought to. Some programs started from 2016, only have one cohort of training taking place. So if we can get a report on all the unattached youth programs.
You'd like a performance report on
from 2016
programs, yes, for unattached youth. This will be the CAP programs
the CAP
all?
Programs, all programs, because the CMU also have self-funded programs. So if we could get those that are funded directly by CMU itself and the CAP.
So that would be how many persons are in the programs,
right?
When the programs
started,
initiated,
how many cohort has rotation of those, and which ones have advanced? Because in the report itself, they speak about the employment of Mr. Othniel Lawrence because of challenges within the program. So we want to know what are those challenges that they have been facing. But I also want to touch on to ask also about the employment of Mr. Othniel Lawrence. Was the board involved in that decision for the employment? And if so, can we get the section of the minutes of the council, they call it the council, on that decision? Also,
and at the meeting, I remember it was raised that the question was asked of the procedure as a wider.
Yes, on the procedure.
Of how he was
engaged.
How he was engaged. So you're asking,
right, to
as
expand
part of that was the board involved as well.
Yes. Also with the naming of the tech center after the former minister.
Center for Innovation.
The involvement of the board with that decision itself also.
Yes.
And if we can get the minutes
again the process by which it was.
Yes, it was decided upon. So those are some of the, and especially to do because with the unattached youth program, because it is partially funded. Most of their programs are funded by the HEART NTA and the Ministry of Education. So the interest in seeing how those are operating itself, and the reason being why it is that they had to bring that consultant on board to advance those programs. So
I would add one question which was not, I think, sufficiently answered in my estimation. The party that was held on the boat, I certainly did not get a conclusive response as to who paid for the party and what was the reason, what was the function about. So we'd like a report on that party that was held on the boat. Member Stewart?
I want to support. Before you go, Member Stewart, because if you look at the report, Chairman, there's there are quite a few dormant accounts being operated by even the university itself. Right? Well, the Ministry of Education itself, but also there's a program that the ministry itself absorptive capacity account, which in their explanation, CMU did not receive any funding during the last 2 years. So I'll show this to the clerk herself.
To formulate the question.
Yeah, especially for this, because what was the purpose of this account? There is a balance of $438,000 in it, but it has not operated for the last 2 years. What was this? It was the program. What was the purpose of this funding, and why is it that the ministry now have they abandoned the program, or what is one of the questions that I want to.
Understood.
Thank you, Chair. In support of Member Phillips, I think it is also prudent for us to get back the HEART people. So it's both HEART and Ministry of Education, because most of these programs fall in the remit of the HEART Trust NTA. And we looked and we saw where there are massive overlaps in terms of the programs being offered. And we would want to get a detailed report of how many persons are engaged in those. I think there are about 7 or 8 programs that we need to look at and to see how is it benefit the overall population of young people within the country.
What I would say, though, Member Stewart, I understand your perspective and I'm guided by the committee, but today we're going to see Ministry of Labour. I don't know if we will finish. Normally we take 1 or 2 sessions. What I'm picking up from Member Phillips is that he's specifically asking some questions of CMU that we could invite them alone to the next meeting to just appear before we continue our other deliberations. Once we are broadening it to the entire ministry, it is now going to be a later date, which would entail the ministry as a whole coming and pulling all the programs together. So I want to be guided by members.
Just to get some clarification in regards to the agenda that was set out for the PAAC. Is it late for us to add anything else for the financial year?
No, absolutely not. An agenda was sent out to all members, yes. But we do have the ability to alter it as we go along. And we from time to time where matters arise, we do bring them in. So, Member Phillips, as it is yours, would you prefer for us to just have those specific questions be taken next week, and then, because I believe that we were going to invite the Ministry of Education on its wider program.
Yes, that is the intention, Chair.
Is that the intention?
What Chair is perhaps write to the High Trust to get a report on the programs that they offer, how many persons are attached to them, where are they located, in which constituencies do we have the young people being benefited from these programs.
But I'd also add to the list of questions, Chair,
yes,
to request a list of consultants employed to the Caribbean Maritime University also.
Or other consultants, if any.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, members, those will be taken into account, and we will invite them to come prior to the deliberations next week. Just the limited to the answers to the questions that we have asked. All right. So, members, today we are going to have with us the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. There are 2 issues. One is the general report, and the second has to do with a report that they did on the payment of industrial security guards. So with that, we'll invite them to come in. PS, morning to the team from Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Welcome to the PAAC. Today, we're looking at two things. One, the update and the report that we have from you from the payment of industrial security guards. And secondly, the basic year report from the ministry, the ministry report. Now, members, yesterday some members had approached me in Parliament to indicate that we had not gotten the written reports. There seemed to have been some problem with the computer systems, and they were not able to open it and make the reports, and then this morning the clerk got them late. So members would have gotten their reports late. So we apologize for that. There seem to have been some issues with refurbishing at the offices, so forth. Sorry about that, but we'll move along. So what we could start with is just an update based on the issue of security guards. We understand that you are in the process. You can give us an update, but we do understand that will not be resolved today. And secondly, we then can ask you to give us the general brief of the ministry, and then we can go through with the members and we can have our discussions after. So, turn it over to you to introduce your team and to give us a report on industrial security guards.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Morning, members. This morning I have with me from the ministry Ms. Deborah Patrick Gardner, Chief Technical Director assigned to the Labor Division, Ms. Gillian Corodos, Director, Industrial Relations and Allied Services, Ms. Diane Thompson-Clark, Legal Officer, Ms. Faylene Foster, Director, Pay and Conditions Employment Branch, Mrs. Simone Mackenzie Mayer, Director, Research and Analysis, and Ms. Philippa Parkinson, Labor Officer from the Pay and Conditions Branch of the Ministry. Chairman, since the last time we were here, just to recap briefly, the 31 companies were identified as providing security services to various government entities. In total, there are 168 companies registered on the PSRA list. Of the 31 companies listed as providing services to the government or various MDAs, 6 of the companies were not found on the PSRA list, but we learned that they are in various stages of registration because there's a process. So it's not that they're totally not there. I don't know if that is clear, but they're in various stages of registration. We did 2 sets of inspection. When we came to the PAAC, we had done 1 inspection, and we did follow-up inspections after that. On the initial inspection, 7 companies did not comply with the ministry's request to produce records. And during the follow-up inspections, we were able to inspect 25 companies to determine whether or not the breaches that we had identified in the first round of inspections, whether or not they were corrected. Because, Chairman, if you recall, when I was here last, I reported to the committee that we did cite the companies for the various breaches, and we left, the companies were issued letters stating the breaches. So our follow-up inspections would be looking now to see whether or not the companies continued to be in breach. So we visited 25, we have so far visited 25 companies in the follow-up inspections. During the follow-up inspections, the ministry was not able to inspect the records of 4 companies. There was one particular company, and Chairman, I'm not calling the companies. There was one particular company that we visited 3 times, and we still failed. The company still failed to provide us with access to the records, which is a breach under our legislation, and we will be pursuing those companies. The key findings, Chairman, the members have it there, so I don't think I need to go through all the key findings, but I want to highlight the conclusion and the next steps, if that's okay with the committee. Okay. So our conclusion, Chairman, after the initial inspection and follow-up inspection is that there were significant levels of non-compliance among the companies in respect to the payment of the prescribed rates of pay and allowances to the security guards. From the information gathered by the ministry and the follow-up inspections, there was no change in the compliance from our initial visit. The ministry will be undertaking more vigorous and consistent compliance monitoring within the industry, and arrangements are currently being made to strengthen the enforcement of legislation through the pursuit of legal proceedings. The ministry will also continue to review its legislative framework. Now, specifically, what are some of the things that we did, Chairman, or will be doing? Last time I said that we will be meeting with the players in the industry. We have not yet met with all the players in the industry. We met with the PSRA. We have not met with the companies. We had to do the inspections, do the follow-up inspections, and see what was the state of play, meaning whether or not there were any attempt by the companies to change. Now that we have seen that there isn't, and we have gathered a little bit more information on the industry, we will be arranging to meet with the companies. Final compliance notice is being issued to 7 companies that failed to produce the records, right? We had a meeting with the PSRA during which an agreement was obtained for both entities to collaborate in the monitoring of the security industry. There was recognition that the definition for security guards in the National Minimum Wage Order varies from the definition that the PSRA uses, or how they define a security guard. They define a security guard based on the tasks that are performed, and the National Minimum Wage Order has a slightly different definition. So one of the things we will be exploring is to see how we can synchronize in terms of the definition that we use to determine who is in fact an industrial security guard. Both of us agreed to explore the possibility, the establishment of a focal point in both agencies or entities to allow for more effective collaboration, the development and implementation of a framework that allows for joint training and inspection going forward. It is anticipated that these measures, once implemented, will allow for more effective oversight over the industry. We have gone a little bit further, Chairman, because one of the questions posed was whether or not government was complicit, and the previous persons who were here from the industry alluded that the rates paid by government were so low that you are literally, I don't want to say, you almost expect that the guards would be underpaid. We're not taking that as was said. We have to gather the facts. And what we have done is we can't examine every ministry. We have taken a sample of ministries, departments, and agencies to look at some of the contracts across government, see what they look like, look at the rates paid, and to see whether or not the rates paid are in fact so low that, implicit in that is that the guards would be underpaid. So that part of the work is still ongoing. Companies that have failed to produce the records after 3 visits and remain in breach, we will be referring to the ministry's legal division to commence legal proceedings. There is one particular company that we still have not been able to find physically, and the ministry will continue to conduct compliance inspections for other companies. So while our focus was on the 31 that we have identified as providing services to various MDAs, we will be expanding outside of the 31. And I think, Chairman, that is
Phillips?
Yes, so, thanks, Chair. In your report, this company that you said you are not able to obtain an address for the company, but is that company I see here listed as a contractor to the government of Jamaica?
Yes, it's not that we haven't been able to get an address for the company. We have not been able to locate the principals. So we have actually visited the address that is on the PSRA listing and the registered address, but we have not been able to find anybody of authority in order to provide us with the requisite information.
What's the next action coming from this now that you have visited locations and not being able to find the principals? What's the next action?
Well, that's one of the things that we discussed with PSRA, if they can assist us. What we're told is that, hold on, that was a company that was under refurbishment? Yeah.
We're working with PSRA to do a joint inspection of that.
Yeah. We're working with PSRA to try and determine the correct location. We gather maybe the company may have moved recently, but we're not so sure.
Or probably just working out of a suitcase.
I don't know, member, and I'm not going to speculate.
No, and before you go, member, and I remember when we had the security representatives here, Chairman, the issue that I have are companies who are contracted to the government of Jamaica, which are in breach of just natural justice, and because it is the government who sets these minimum rates, and these are companies who are paying below these minimum rates. Because looking at your report here, the one that what jumps out at me are the companies. 17 companies were not compliant with the payment of maternity leave. 17 of those that have, and maternity leave is something that is on the law books of this country. And this is what I would term basically modern day slavery then, Chairman. Here in Jamaica, where these companies are taking advantage of those who probably can't do any better, and they have found work in this, and that's why it's painful, Madam PS, because I would love to see more action from Ministry of Finance, because I said last time, we speak about join up government when it is convenient, but it is the Ministry of Finance that governs the procurement of government contracts. And these contracts most likely have to go to Cabinet for approval. How is it that we swiftly cauterize the breaking of the law in these? Is it that we make recommendation from this committee, Chairman, that these contracts be halted until and something else put in place? But it can't be something where you are trying to, Ms. Mackenzie, Mayor, believe me, I always say that the reality of how some of these people live compared to what it is that these companies may portray are two different things. And when one of these individuals can't do any better but to stay in employment, you should see how some of them are treated, worse than even the dogs that they're handling on a daily basis. And when the government itself and myself as a legislator set laws in here, and then there are those who are out there breaking the laws, first thing, we are responsible to correct those shortcomings. And it is not to handpick 1, 2, or 3, but taxpayers are paying these companies, and some of them hundreds of millions of dollars. And if it is that a government ministry or agency is trying to get information for them to correct those shortcomings, and they're refusing, then I have a problem, Chairman. I have a problem with it. And I think that there should be swift action taken And I'm glad to see that the ministry has continued their survey of and revisited those that you have. And I'm disappointed to see that nothing has changed with those that you have visited for a second time. And those are the ones that we need to come down hard on.
Is there any mandatory arrangement when these licenses are being given out in regards that you must carry out in respect to these contracts that is being given out, especially those who come to get their own license to operate? There's anything mandatory coming from the Ministry of Labor stroke, the Ministry of National Justice, National Security, that is mandatory? That means you can't go against that, none at all. If you do that, you cannot receive a license to operate.
Chairman, if I can add to the discussion, that's why we're meeting with the PSRA to understand what they look for so that we can understand the licensing process from the PSRA. So I can't really speak to the licensing process. What I can say, Chairman, is one of the reasons we also want to look at the contracts is not just to look at the rates that are in the contract and what is paid, but we want to look at some of the stipulations within the contract so that we can see for ourselves whether or not there is sufficient safeguard in those contracts from the government standpoint. So we are looking at that. What I want to point out, though, is that the government of Jamaica we're signatory to an ILO convention which speaks to labor clauses in public contracts. And I know that with the revision of the Public Procurement Act and the regulations, it was one of the things that we had put to the Ministry of Finance to include within the regulations of the Public Procurement Act aspects as it relates to labor clauses. So that act was recently finally in force since April, and so what we're doing is looking at how we have moved in terms of public contracts since then.
Member Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, I want to fully endorse the sentiments of my colleague from Northwest Manchester. But P.S., I'm a bit flabbergasted with the difficulty in reaching this company that is contracted currently with the government of Jamaica. There's a simple way, P.S. Follow the money. Stop the payment and you find the owner immediately. Finish. You don't need nobody running around. If you stop the payment this week, they come to you, not you go after them. Why is it that these people with money can get away scot-free? And the security guards who work on minimum wage, and we have seen here even below minimum wage. This is a company that is employed to the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, the Prime Minister's ministry. That have, how much, 17 weeks? So 17 companies, but have weeks of maternity leave.
17 companies not paying.
P.S., this is not rocket science. If I were you, I'd call the Prime Minister and say one of the companies in your ministry is in breach, can't find the owner. I'm at a loss.
Well, member, our investigation is ongoing, and I did
an investigation.
I did put in the report that we'll be contacting that particular ministry. So even though what I must point out in the report, members, while we put the ministry, there are instances where it's not the parent ministry, it may be an agency falling under the ministry. That is, yeah.
Responsible. A telephone call alone should get the answer. Not even a letter. A telephone call. And yet a man pick hockey and him go out of prison for 3 months.
All right. Are there any other questions? Member Stewart?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. Is there another body that is responsible for carrying out due diligence on these companies before they are contracted? And are there not guidelines in which they should abide by operationally before they are given a contract?
Member, I will try and answer that question as best as possible. The guidelines from a procurement standpoint, that's where the guidelines are usually, and it usually say, for example, that companies need to have a tax compliance certificate, and they need to be PSRA registered. So usually you will find that they are tax compliant and they have their registration. But what we are doing as a ministry with the Public Procurement Act and the regulations is going a little bit further to say you must have labor clauses inserted in public contracts. And that's where we're going, member.
Did you say that they're supposed to be PSRA registered?
Registered, yes.
So,
but registration is a process. So the registration expires and they have to apply to be re-registered.
Right. So my question then is those that are in the process, and I remember the last report that came,
re-registered.
These are now re-registration.
Re-registration,
okay. No,
right. Right.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, may I just take you to page 2, the third paragraph of your report? There are some companies named in that paragraph as during the follow-up inspection, the ministry was not able to inspect the records of 4 entities you mentioned. The second entity named on that in that paragraph is that entity a member of the Jamaica Society of Industrial Security. Yes.
Member, I couldn't answer that question, but they are one of the larger companies, and by the representative who was here last, he did say that they represent, I believe at the time he had said about 60% of the companies in the industry.
Right.
So.
Does the legislation under which you operate, does it allow you discretion as to whether you prosecute or not?
Can I ask the legal officer to assist?
Through you, PS, the legislation empowers the officers to institute proceedings, but the ministry is primarily about compliance. So in visiting and revisiting, they're trying to ensure, first of all, that the companies comply before they institute criminal or legal proceedings.
Okay. Let me try and understand this clearly. You investigate. You determine that there is, in fact, a breach. and you go back to North Street and you make a determination that what you want is compliance after you've discovered the breach for which that company ought to be prosecuted.
So the notice of the breach, when we visited in the first round, all right, we advised the companies of the breach that we had discovered on inspection.
This is in furtherance of the question I asked you as to whether the ministry is there any provision in the law which says that you have that discretion after having determined that there is a breach, that whether you can decide to waive the breach and not prosecute?
You want to add?
Member, just to clarify, the process is that we have the duty to inspect the records of these companies. We inspect the records, and we will have to, if we identify a breach, bring to attention that there is in fact a breach. There is no latitude for our discretion, but what we do is to ensure that having notified that organization that a breach exists, we go back to ensure that it has now been rectified.
So in fact, if that breach were never to be rectified, at what point do you decide whether or not you prosecute? I'm not sure.
Well, immediately, once there's a breach, there is a breach, and the ministry will take whatever action is required to ensure compliance.
Let us explore this a little further. Let's reference these 4 entities that which you have here. They all beforehand know that which they have to comply with, right? They know. All the rules are published for them. You know that you're not supposed to commit murder. Yeah? And you go in and you go into the property and you discover a body. And you are allowed an opportunity to remove the body. And then you go back and say, well, you know that you have removed the body, we can say you're compliant. I'm sure that is not what I'm understanding. That I'm just totally misunderstanding the application of the rules as set out in the law. That you come to Mr. XYZ company, you find that he's in breach, touching all the rules for pay and conditions and all of that. And you give him an opportunity, because as I understand it, what the obligation on the part of the officer investigators is to collate the evidence and put it before the prosecuting authority, and not to give him an opportunity to remove the body and then for them to say that, you know, we didn't see a body there. I'm not sure that is what is happening. That you come to Mr. XYZ, who is a multimillionaire, and he's breached the law in several areas, and you give him an opportunity to remove all the evidence which was there. What then do you use to prosecute him?
Member, if I may, I think what you're saying is quite understandable. Let me just seek to clarify that the ministry, remember, with the companies, once they're found in breach, when we pursue legal action, we're going on the basis of criminal prosecution. The issue of due process becomes very important. So we do try to ensure that we would have collected the evidence and given the company adequate time to address the situation. That said, it does not mean that the company is liable for the breaches that would have been found from day one, right? For example, if you're in breach, you're in breach. If you have underpaid, you're still owing. So I just wanted to make a distinction between putting a proper position and a series to satisfy that you would have gone a certain course versus liability. Okay.
Where is the deterrence? He's just given an opportunity to, if he's underpaid an employee, yes, I know that's a civil side.
Member Campbell, just turn the mic.
Oh, that's the civil side. But he's not prosecuted because the Ministry of Labor has decided, okay, what we really want is compliance, and once we have compliance, then we're okay. You can go on misbehaving. You can down the road, because we haven't prosecuted you. You haven't had to pay $1 million fine, so it's okay. Because 3 months down the road, we collar another half a dozen guards and we underpay them, and if you do find out, yeah, okay, go on, pay them up. Isn't the fact of the prosecution supposed to be the deterrent item that you place there for him not to breach? I imagine so, but let me just go a little further. When you, of all these persons that you have found non-compliant in the various categories, how many of them have been prosecuted since you have gone out and done your survey?
Member, in relation to that question, yes, we have identified a few in breach, and we are taking the necessary legal action towards prosecution.
Which takes me to the point.
So that update we will be able to provide at a subsequent meeting.
Let me get to the point now, which is segueing into this. What is the basis for deciding who you prosecute? You have decided, you have selected a few that you're going to prosecute. Why aren't you prosecuting the entire field? Because I really want to know on what basis you select XYZ, TR1, or whoever it is.
Remember what we have said is that there is a process and we have to allow due process. So we went, so the companies that we're moving first with, and I don't want you to interpret what we've said that we're not going to be prosecuting everybody, right? But we are taking things in stages. So we visited once with a company. They didn't allow us access. We left the letters notifying them that what they have done is in fact a breach. I would want to believe, and I may be wrong, that some of the companies do not understand the powers of a labor officer. Maybe they feel that a labor officer does not have the authority to go in and inspect the records. So we notify them, which was the first thing that we did at the first.
May I just suggest?
Hold on, Chairman. Hold on, Member.
Madam PS, let me suggest. You see when fire burn you? Once, and it's a fire again? I can't burn it. May I suggest you take that approach? No discretion. Once you identify, you're under no obligation to say to anybody, yes, you're present. Yeah. And once you burn, you don't want to be burnt a second time. Yes. And I believe that is where we have to go now. And I suggest to the chairman that we include as part of our recommendation the fact that the discretionary that has been built into your processes are in fact inadequate, and it ought to be eliminated, because I am saddened at the numbers that I see here, because these rules seem to be adhered to more in the breach than in the compliance. I will leave it at that.
Yes, microphone.
You support the point made by Member Campbell. You said that you believe that some of the companies don't understand the power of a labor officer. And that could be the reason, because if you don't prosecute, then you feel you don't have any power. And that could be the reason why they really don't understand, because of the way you practice your approach in terms of how you deal with them.
Right.
Yeah.
And member, I said it doesn't mean that we're not going to prosecute. We visited, we left the notice of the breach to the companies, right? We visited a second time. Those companies who we visited a second time and continue not to allow us to view the records, it is those companies now that we are going to be moving ahead. But we have to follow a process. You visit a company, the company has to be notified that they are in breach.
And that's
right?
But I just want to ask, what is the time frame from the first visit to the second visit?
It was about a month.
Okay,
approximately.
Approximately
a month.
Because in your report here, you're saying that there were no improvements with those. It was 24 that you had visited first. And in the revisit a month after, there was no improvement in the compliance.
Right. And so, remember, I think I need to clarify something to ensure that there is no misunderstanding. There are varying breaches that were committed by the companies. Mm-hmm. The first breach is to not allow a labor officer to inspect the records, right? The second breach is in relation to the payment, the correct payment of the single time, double time, and the other benefits.
So in this instance, since some of these companies are employed by the government, are these ministries or agencies also notified at the same time that these companies are in breach?
We have not formally notified the ministries, but I have spoken to some of the permanent secretaries.
I would suggest that you formally notify them.
Mm-hmm. All right, so members, I think, PS, do we have a sort of time frame that you think that you would at least get? We've had some preliminary reports, but I think we want to get one that sort of completes this first phase of data collection and sort of says, this is what these are the actions we're going to take. Am I correct, committee? I think that's so we just want an idea. What sort of time frame are you working on? And
Chairman, it is going to be a process, because
yes, we understand that.
So I would say, in terms of looking at the various contracts and certainly these first set of companies that we have found to continue to be in breach, which we are going to be referring to our legal department, I would say maybe in another month or so we can give another update to the committee.
So
but it will still not be a final, because this is going to be a long process.
No, we understand.
And by then we are hoping that we would have met with the industry.
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm not so clear here. You say in a 1 month time you'll have a report and an update for where we are. Those that are currently in breach by your investigation so far, what are the immediate steps are going to be taken against those companies?
There are some of the companies, member, that we have referred to our legal department to begin looking at all the documentation that we have, the visits that have been made, the notices that have been given, for them to now advise us how we proceed further with the prosecution.
But I hear your peers, but I have a particular interest in the company referred to by my colleague with the maternity law breach.
17.
This is breach meaning breaking the law.
17.
I made the analogy about the man and the Akif. I got 3 months. He got 3 months because he broke the law. These people are breaking the law, and some poor security guards are experiencing the difficulties as we speak. Women. This don't need no process. This needs some immediate action. And that's why people lose faith in us as government. Whichever side of the political aisle we fall on. They lose faith in governance because they experience these things, and those of us who they elect fail to do anything with the authority that we have of public office to ameliorate their circumstances. So there is an emergency here, not another due process. And that's why I said it with all seriousness, PS. If you have the payment for this company that you can't find, stop the payment. I know the owner is going to show up. And we have done it. And we can do it. That's what hurts people. The doable things are not done, and they continue to suffer every single day that passes. And as I said, they lose faith in you, they lose faith in me, they lose faith in all of us who they entrust with public office.
And I think that you had made the point that you're going to make some recommendations after, because you have to look at the contracts that are issued by the various ministries of government and departments and agencies. So you want to standardize, and I think that at the end of the day, one of the recommendations you'd end at is to indicate what you believe in consultation with the PSRA and the Ministry of Finance, etc., to determine what are the things that, or the rates and different regulations you will follow in your contracts. In other words, what is it that government is going to require as its minimum, and put those in the contract so that at least we regularize what the situation is with the government. So I think that's where we want to go to. So you said possibly in a month we'll have the clerk just get in touch with you.
We could provide another update, because as I said, Chairman, this is going to be ongoing. Because if we go to court and criminal, it's going to be an ongoing process.
Well, where we had started was a letter that we had received, which basically said that some of the minimum wages that you had put, that you publish every year for security guards, was not being paid by companies engaged to ministries. I think that's where we're starting, but what we have is a more comprehensive look at it. I think it's timely, and I think it's good for the committee to look at it and get a report. We understand, but we want, while we know the recommendations and the overall picture may take a while, what I'm picking up from the members is a sort of impatience for us to move on some of the more egregious issues. So, as I said, you have indicated in a month we'll get the report, and the minister and the members can determine whether or not you would just continue the work, or whether or not we would need clarifications based on what comes back out of the report. Ms. Wembley.
Are you taking any other questions now?
Well, I'm going to. I was going to move on now from this report. We were just discussing the report that was given to us on the security guards, but I want to move now to the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Today, members, what we have here is we had indicated that we were going to look at a review of the status report, Manpower Services Limited, Electronic Labor Exchange, Employment Agencies Unit, the Pay Conditions and Employment Branch, and the Industrial Tribunals, Dispute Tribunal. So those were the issues we're looking at today. Members, I would draw your attention to the report that we have here from the ministry. There are a number of other portfolios that fall within the ministry. There is PATH, there is the National Insurance Scheme and the fund, the Overseas Employment, the Electronic Labor Exchange, and the Private Employment Agency, and the Jamaica Productivity Center. So there are some other things, but what I would say, members, is that we would take that next week, right? Those other issues. But we were looking through the information. We don't have a lot of information on the other issues, such as the National Insurance Scheme, the fund. We have a half page on it, but we would need a more detailed report on it and its investments. The overseas work program, again, just these are programs that impact everybody, and I think it is important for us to look at it, but we need some more information to guide our deliberations.
Well,
so that would be for next week, though.
Well, Chairman, we thought we were being asked to provide a status update on the ministry, all the areas in the ministry.
Yes.
But so what you have gotten is that. So what you're now saying, you want a more detailed report on those specific areas? Is that what you're asking? Because I need some clarification.
What I'm saying is normally the reports that we get on the different departments within the ministries is a little more comprehensive than what we have gotten today. For example, I made the point of the overseas work program. We basically have, it's just a page with some bullets. I'm just saying we need a little more.
So you need a detailed report on
a more detailed
on every area, or those specific ones that you had singled out?
Certainly the ones that I've picked out. I don't know if members have any others that they may need, but certainly the ones that I picked out seem to me to be the. There's also the work permit department. So these are areas where, again, it comes up from time to time. This is where we're going through the information from the ministry, and I'm certain the members would want an idea of sort of policy and what exists now at the work permit department in terms of what we're doing and how we're proceeding.
Well, Chairman, it would greatly assist us because if the committee could expound on the specifics, because we were asked for a status update and we just pulled, in terms of, because even the report is in relation to 2018-19.
Yeah, with the clerk, because we have, it's not the first, so we have some from before. What we will do is I'll ask her later today or tomorrow to give you. I'm sure the information is there. It's just that we want to ensure that we have the information to guide our deliberations.
Yes. And I would want to be able to be in a position to provide the relevant information that the committee wants to look at.
Between the consultant and the clerk, we'll ask them to give you that. So those are the things that we would take next week, and then we would look at the ones we have for this week. So what you came prepared today to look at those that I had told you that are on the agenda. Am I correct? Or you came just generally? You came generally. All right, well, what I would do is I would start by just saying, if you could, give us an overview of the ministry, where you're at now, and then what we will do. Members, we do have some of the matters here on our agenda. We can go through those. And the additional information, as I said, I named out, members took a look at it. Is there anything else that members had indicated? Path, the social intervention program, national insurance scheme.
You mentioned work permit.
The overseas employment program. Jamaica Productivity Center.
And in that case, Chairman, I would need a different team, because the team that is here is specific to pay and conditions.
Which is the point, but that's what I'm saying. Normally, they would have sent it. Hence why they put this on the agenda for today. But for next week, we will. I'm just elaborating now that we would need the other information on these things, these other areas for next week, and also to say that we are intending to take some questions next week. From 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. Some questions were asked of another ministry. So we will be starting our deliberations with you probably after about 11.
Chair, can I just, on the PATH program, the step to work aspect of it, because here you said at the end of February there were 342,710 registered. I imagine most of those are children.
Yes.
Right? But
70% would be children. 70%. Mm-hmm. But here you said only 450 PATH beneficiaries were placed in jobs. If we can just elaborate a little more in the next report on some of the difficulties, because we, even as members of parliament, even sometime when we get these summer work programs, just to place persons in a summer job, even with government paying, it is a difficulty. So if just that area, if you can just elaborate a little more when you're coming back on some of the I will elaborate on steps to work, but the 450 would not be in relation to students.
No, I know.
Right.
I know. These are adults. So,
right.
Yeah. All right. So, but
and in most instances, it would be 450 families, because it would be maybe one person from a family. Yeah.
Right. And just, all right. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so.
Just let me clear. These things you are going through these are for, you're going by this?
Yes.
Yeah, and those things are for next week?
Right.
Okay, because I have one I can serve notice on.
Which one?
Mm-hmm.
It's not listed in here, but it falls under UNIF. Particularly want to inquire into the Malaya hotel refurbishing exercise that was done, payments. What's the status? A status report, and how that exercise. Well, the exercise is completed. Yes. Are we up to date with the payments being made? I don't know if you can answer it today, or I need to deal with it next.
Well, I think it is better for us to, the basis of having the reports, so that we can better inform ourselves of the discussion.
I'll leave it there, Chairman.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I'd just like to find out from the ministry, from the permanent secretary, if there is any information coming to your office in regards to NIS workers, pensioners who have not been paid for a period of time.
Well, let me just say this. What we were saying is that today we had asked them to bring one section of the ministry, which we'll be discussing, which is on the agenda. We have now indicated next week that we're asking them to bring the other departments and agencies, which would have their staff as well, who could assist. And one of those coming next week would be the NIS. So I think more appropriately that question, I think maybe you get a precursor of what the direction and so forth, but probably better able to answer next week with the complement. Well, S and F. Microphone. Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. There were some challenges about 2 years ago or so with NIF and with personnel and all that, and I have an interest in finding out what has been done to deal with those issues and as to whether the actual reports that we have are in place, and if the fund is actually on good footing. I'd certainly.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will get the report and we'll take that next meeting. So, Pierce, I would. Yes.
Do we have a representative from the overseas employment agencies?
Again, we had asked for next week.
The overseas.
Yes.
That's and that's specific to the
with a report.
The Canadian and the American work.
Yes.
Together with the hotel.
Exactly.
All lumped in.
Yes, we've asked for that, as well as the work permit department. So there's quite a few.
To add to it, Chairman, if we could get an update of this gender equity in terms of payment, in terms of in terms of the payment for the females versus the male. And I would also be interested to find out also in regards to the security companies.
All right. Okay, so Pierce, so we could proceed with what you have today, which was the basic report, your manpower services, electronic labor exchange, employment agencies, the pay and conditions of employment branch, and the IDT. So I would ask you to just give us your basic.
Chairman, can you repeat them?
No, they're on the agenda.
I don't have my letter with me.
Yeah, well,
there were manpower services.
Have a copy of the agenda.
Because, Chairman, what I was...
Here. Yes, and what we will do is ensure that by this afternoon you get the follow-up list, just although you'd have heard it now, so that you can keep that.
All right. All right, Chairman, the report as was tabled or presented to the committee, we sort of spoke to the ministry's mission, vision, or strategic outcomes or portfolio areas, which I won't go into. We gave an update in terms of our budget and expenditure for 18-19 and our budget for 19-20. And the committee will note that our budget for 19-20 has increased over 2018-19. So we moved all right, in terms of the manpower services, and I'm trying to find this section in the report. Just give me a second.
Michael,
All right, so the manpower services section of the ministry looks at the overseas employment program. There are several different areas falling under manpower. The overseas employment program, the Canadian and the US program, the private employment agencies, and local employment. Now, under the overseas employment program for 2018-19, 16,763 workers were placed in employment overseas for both the US and the Canadian program. 3,028 Jamaicans were placed in employment through private employment agencies monitored by the ministry. In terms of local employment, job seekers are placed in jobs locally through the electronic labor exchange. The electronic labor exchange persons, I'm not sure if members are familiar with it, but the electronic labor exchange seeks to register employers and jobs, having employers post their jobs, and we try to have job seekers register on that portal so that we can match employers with workers. We also do a number using that unit. We do a number of placements, persons in on-the-job training. So the electronic labor exchange, that's the unit where we have, well, it's one ministry and we try to have a joined up ministry. So our steps to work persons, we have them registered on the electronic labor exchange, and we have forged a number of partnerships, MOUs, with a number of institutions and universities to have their graduates register on the electronic labor exchange.
P.S. When I went through the report on this one, a thought occurred to me: how much Jamaica and the public at large is aware of this. For example, in my own constituency, I will get requests from time to time from persons seeking job. And I just wondered, I'm aware that the ministry do provide this listing, but to what extent the public at large? Because you're talking about not just unskilled persons, you have skilled persons, yes, people with degrees and so on, who don't register there. And I'm just wondering how much more we could possibly do to evangelize, so to speak, this service that you do offer.
Well, we have been doing quite a number of public education around the electronic labor exchange. We have a number of MOUs with the various chambers of commerce. So we have an MOU with the Manchester Chamber of Commerce, the St. Anne Chamber of Commerce, the St. James or Montego Bay Chamber of Commerce. And we have been going around with having a number of fairs. Members would have gotten invitations for our various labor roadshows within the parishes that we have had, and we have been promoting what we have done, and it will be launched in a matter of weeks, about another 2 or 3 weeks, because we realize that the workforce of today is changing from mine and your time. What we have done, we have developed an app where persons can download the app to their smartphone and register using the app. So that app will be launched in another 2 or 3 weeks, and in another few weeks, early in June, it will be launched. And we believe that with the launch of that app, it will help us in terms of promoting and the general populace. Because right now you have to log on to the World Wide Web and things. So with the app, it will make it a little easier at persons' fingertips.
And I would suggest you make it available. I'm speaking in a representative capacity here now of all members of parliament, all councillors throughout the country, because the truth is, all of us who are elected get approached by persons who are in search of job and don't know where to go, where opportunities might exist. And to the extent that you have employers who are reaching out to you, I think you have to optimize that marriage between employer and employee, prospective employees as much as possible.
And so, Chairman, what the app will do, when you have, for example, a job seeker that has registered, let's say, as a grade 1 carpenter, for argument's sake, and an employer is looking a grade 1 carpenter, the job seeker will get a notification if a prospective job has come up that they qualify for. Now how it works is they have to log on and they have to be checking. So with that app, it is putting, and this is where the ministry is going, Chairman, where we're going is trying to put our services within the fingertips of persons. And so that app is moving in that direction.
The younger people who are more adept with social media and more tech savvy.
Yes, and the labor market is changing, Chairman. Millennials don't want to be full-time, permanently employed. The labor market is in fact changing.
Okay, thanks. So you can go on.
Right, so I spoke about the electronic labor exchange unit. The ministry monitors private employment agencies, Chairman, to ensure that they are regulated. We are aware, Chairman, that there are a number of persons out there and persons try to scam potential job seekers. We have been putting numerous notices in the newspaper. We have been putting media advisories, but people continue to be victims of various scamming exercises. Part of our mandate is to monitor and regulate private employment agencies, and we do that. So we license them. The total number of agencies licensed by the ministry during the quarter was 64. 184 inspections were conducted because we have a mandate. We don't just license, but we inspect. We visit them and inspect that they are in compliance with the licenses. I spoke about the job scammers already. The list of legitimate employment agencies, Chairman, we place them on the ministry's website and the LMIS website, and I'm going to use the Parliament as a medium to encourage, if there are persons listening, to encourage persons to check the ministry's websites to ensure that whoever they are trying to seek employment through, that they are properly registered agencies. And if they are in doubt, we have now adopted a tagline: when in doubt, check it out.
I was just looking at the report and just coming back to me what you were just saying before when you were talking about your app and the change in whole labor force, and seeing here where the Employment Agencies Regulation Act of 1957. So does this act still have any relevance in today's?
It still has relevance, member, but we recognize that the act needs updating. And I'll give you an example. So the act expects that an employment agency must have a physical address and a physical location. What we're finding now is a lot of jobs being advertised via the internet, and that job could be advertised. The company may be in Timbuktu advertising a job. And so the current legislation doesn't recognize things like that. So that piece of legislation is now under review to ensure that it is relevant to how we have changed over the past 60 years.
Yeah, so it is under review.
It is under review.
Okay.
Madam Pierce, I hear you about what you're doing to bring awareness. One of the sad realities in the country is that when people are desperate, they do sometimes stupid things. Stupid in the eyes of you and I. We will call ourselves reasonable persons, but it's out of desperation. And there are persons out there who are seizing on this desperation. And that's the reason why they get jilted many times, these innocent persons. What I'm curious to know, P.S., persons who are found to be in breach and really in a scamming business, what is the consequences to those when you find for those breaches? That's one. And two, do you send out a red flag or some public company XY is in breach, people must stay away from them? Unless you have some kind of big alert. These desperate persons are very prone to take a chance. And they find themselves in a worse situation than they were before. I have encountered some of those in my own constituency. It is akin to many of these, and I will say it publicly, some of these entities are offering training for practical nursing, right? And they collect these fees for these courses, and it's a dead-end training program. They went through secondary school, really screwed up, right? And they want to get a second chance to get some certification to get employment somewhere. They end up beg, borrow, because some of them come to me to as MP to pay fees to go to these. They end up with a certificate that leads them nowhere. And the only people who benefit are the persons who run these training programs. Same thing with the employment thing. Desperation, they go to them, borrow the money, pay the fee, and they are worse off. We as the state, as foolish as it might be, or it is, for them to go to these scamming people, right? We have to seek to even provide more protection, recognizing their desperation that leads them into those kind of engagements. So tell me more what we can do, what we're doing, and what being done can be done to ameliorate that situation.
Well, Chairman, that we recognize that that is a challenge, and many times we don't know that company X is doing something. We will hear something being talked about. So what we have been doing is trying to educate the public that you should really only be doing business with these licensed employment agencies. So we can't say company X and put a red alert, because we really don't know unless we have investigated company X or gotten a complaint, formally a complaint coming to say company X has done this. So we really don't get, Chairman, a lot of people coming to us and saying that I paid company X amount of money, they have not provided me with a job. They don't say that. We will hear about it. And that is why we're trying to educate. A lot of it, yes, a lot of it is embarrassment, because even persons, Chairman, when you tell them, using the farm work program, for example, you say there is no money that you are to pay to participate in the program. but you will hear stories of people paying people money to participate in the program. So even though we preach it, we talk it, people do it, but they are not coming to us. When we do hear about the instances, right, and people have said, we say, well, you need to go to the police and you need to report it because it becomes now a police matter. But we do monitor those who we grant licenses to ensure that they're operating within the ambit of the licenses.
One before. Should they come and report and you have carried out the investigation and verify that they collected money from someone, can't you then say company XY who has collected money from other persons, no one should engage with them? You see, my wording might not be as finessed.
Yes, and Chairman, we have to be careful.
But you get what
of
I'm trying to convey. Because, they get away with these things and these people remain victims. And they're the ones I'm concerned about, the ones who are the victims.
To just them down to that. The ministry has a PR department, standalone, and again,
small PR department.
No, that's the point I'm making, because in many instances, it has to do with the farm work, it has to do with overseas employment overall, and just labor laws, because there ought to be continuous public education on instances like this. So if it is one thing that we may have to look at, Chairman, when it comes to the budgetary time and standing finance, to look at ministries like the Ministry of Labour to see if can be an increased amount for the budget for PR, because just like how the Ministry of Health is constantly doing a reminder.
I think you want to say public education.
Yeah, for public education. No, yeah, and it's.
She's doing good, but we want her to do better.
Yeah. You see, just like those who may not turn up at the ministry because they got scammed, she probably feel, restrained. But
doesn't want her minister feel that she's putting pressure. But we have a job for those who represent.
But it is critical for the public education, a constant public education in instance, because it's quite a lot. I mean, I can tell you that even now, I've seen it in Manchester, persons coming to me who said that they have been sold a form for farm work. And
even though it is written on the form, not for sale.
He is desperate for employment. And it is sometimes is months or years after, when they can't collect back the money from who they paid it to, that they will come to us as the political representative to say, how you can help me. Or how can I get on the program, because they have, and if it is that public education is not out there because of that desperation for employment, then somebody going to get scammed. So it is a matter of how it is that we can keep that constant public education out there.
Pierce, before you respond to member, I want to add that in, because I know from reports I've gotten in my constituency, reports that I've gotten, when we put it that way, with the farm work tickets, persons who have gotten on the program because some money was exchanged, as prohibited as it is, when they know of somebody who let off our money and get a farm work ticket and go on the farm work program, they don't want any more proof than that pain can get them somewhere. That's how corruption really strive. Because people see the results. They come to me, then they won't get on it because the list is already filled. But a man let off our money and him get on and he's gone. So.
Well, Chairman, we in cases like that, I mean, we need to know who is facilitating. What I can tell the committee is that we work very closely with CTOC and MOCA, and we have had a number of prosecutions specifically relating to the overseas employment program. I don't know if members remember, I think it was 2 years ago, it was in the media where there was a multi-agency thing in St. Catherine and Clarendon, and a number of persons were arrested and prosecuted. It was related to the overseas employment program. So where we take it seriously, and I take it even more seriously, member, not that I don't take all the matters seriously, but if somebody comes to me and can finger point and say, I paid person $50,000, X amount of money, whatever it may be, right, and I was able to get on the program, or even if they weren't able to get on the program, but they paid somebody money and somebody took it, we need to know, I need to know, member, because then that means that something is going on untoward that I need to deal with within the ministry. In relation to public education, I will tell you, and the Ministry of Finance is here, that we work very closely, but I don't think any ministry will say they have enough money for PR, and my ministry is no different. But we try, as good stewards of the government's purse, we try to work within the budget. But we are, in fact, stepping up our public education, and we have been sending out, as soon as we get them, public service advisories. I think it was Thursday or Friday of last week. What is happening is that now people are circulating things on social media and using the ministry's picture and website and logo and making the message seem as if it is an authentic message, but they're really not. And as soon as we come across those, we have been putting advisories out that the ministry did not issue any advisory in relation to this. It is a scam, and we try to tell persons, do not recirculate it and please ignore. So we have been doing a number of things as soon as they come to our attention.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, member.
Yes, I just want to drill down a little more on the overseas employment, the farm work, otherwise farm work thing. Just to get a better understanding of, for the benefit of those persons out there. In my own case, I know of several persons who did the preliminaries. They came in 3 years ago, and they did the preliminary testing, and they're told, okay, you're okay, you will be called in to do biometrics or something. They wait 2 years to have that done, and they continue to wait. Is that the normal process that you have to go through, waiting 3 years from the
80% of the persons who travel on the overseas employment program are repeat persons. So 20% are new persons. So when we do a pre-selection, and I call it a pre-selection exercise, that is when, forms are issued and we do a first screening where persons are interviewed, and you say, okay, well, you have met the grade on the first screening. So those persons are put in a pool. So when new jobs come up, because 80% of the jobs are repeat, so when new jobs come up, we pull from that pool and place persons. Based on where we are with the pool, remember, we should not have someone waiting 3-4 years if in the pool. So if there is a situation like that, then, let us know so we can drill down, because we pull from the pool, and
I figured that is
first in, first out.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
But and it frustrates, persons, because for my part, I know that the particular individual, he was given one, he went through the preliminaries. I gave it to a second one, this is the following year. But the one for the second year got through, and he's gone about his business.
So that is why you need to point it out to us, because maybe something may have happened, and I don't know why he would have.
And hence the question I'm asking now, because I would have thought that it would have been operated on the FIFO and LIFO principle. So he gets frustrated, he turns up at my office and then he starts asking the question if there is anybody who he can let off a thing on, right? So because that is,
I know,
the story is circulating that it is somebody has gotten something and hence XYZ was able to jump on the plane. Additionally, there are cases, and these are all real cases, where a man is called in, a fee is collected from him on the basis that it is being paid over to the embassy or some place. But he's not given a place on the flight. And it happens once, twice, 3 times.
So remember, the process is that the only fees that are payable are the biometric visa fee and the medical fee. All right? And those are paid directly. Now I'm going to explain to you why someone may pay a fee and then end up having to pay the fee again the following year. All right? So in our processing, we try to match workers with employers. But what we do is, beginning about October in each year, we begin processing a pool of workers. So we pull from that pool, a pool of workers, a second pool, who we will go through the second stage in the process with them, waiting now to be in a state where we can match them with employers. Because if we wait until we get the request from the employer to match them, then we're going to be too late, because it takes time to process the visa, it takes time to do the biometric, the individual has to get their police record up to date. There are a number of things that have to be done. So round about the middle or the end of October, we start processing what we call a pool of workers, who we intend that in the following year, once we get job placements, we place them. So at that time, they will be required to pay the biometric fee and all of those fees. Unfortunately, remember, it's not a one-to-one process. When I say not a one-to-one, meaning we may get the next year, maybe a very good year, and we get lots of jobs, and we can place everybody who we have taken through this second stage. But there are times when we do over the amount. So let's say we have 1,000 new spots, but we may have taken 1,200 persons through that second stage. When we get to the next year, when those 200 that we weren't able to place in that year, when we get to the following year, we try to place those 200, but unfortunately they're going to have to pay the fee a second time.
Have you developed a matrix or all this is done manually? It goes to individuals at different desks, or is there a system and you throw all these names in and it comes up matching the individuals with in terms of the dates when they've done all they've gone through the various processes?
No, it's not. It's not manual. It's a combination of electronic and manual.
Because you know what can happen when you have too many of the let me not take that.
What I will tell you, member, is that when we take from the pool, it's not a handpick from the pool. It is a random selection. that is done from the pool.
You say random, but if it is machine determined.
It's machine determined.
Machine determined. There are certain factors which would determine who takes precedence, as opposed to when you have the human input. He can determine, for whatever reason, he doesn't like the color of my eyes or the fact that I have bow legs or whatever it is. You know, he can determine. Well, I don't have them, so but I'm saying they can use all kinds of reasons for eliminating people, but the machine doesn't do that. And hence the question I'd asked earlier as to whether
it's randomly generated from the MIS department, and the only criteria is every parish. So we have names in the pool from every parish, and the only criteria is that we need every parish represented when we pick randomly.
I heard you earlier when you said that there are all these things being generated and to give the appearance that it is being done by the Ministry of Labour. And we come to MIS, and I have a particular concern about that. How secure are your systems? Because cybersecurity is one big challenge. How secure are your systems, and in particular in relation to the selection of these people?
Well, I am not the MIS expert on IT security. What I can tell you is that the ministry is spending quite a tidy sum of money upgrading our infrastructure and our network. So between our offices, for example, we have our own wide area network, which was previously on, I don't know what you call it, but now we're upgrading to fiber, for example, right? So we have dedicated lines between our office and our parish offices, right? But of course, our offices and our systems are still open to the World Wide Web, even though we have our dedicated wide area network. So we are spending monies upgrading. As a matter of fact, it was Monday of this week, I approved a payment for us to upgrade our antivirus system. But that's as far as I can tell you. I'm not the IT expert to be able to go further into how secure. That question is something my IT experts would have to answer. But what I do know, and I can say, is that we have been upgrading our systems to ensure that they're more robust and they're more secure.
Chair.
Mr. Stewart, before you and then.
Yes, thank you.
Because my question is a follow-up too.
Is a follow-up.
Oh, a follow-up. Okay.
Yes, also.
Go ahead.
Also.
Follow-up also?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to make reference to my colleague who spoke just now as relates to cybersecurity. Because we have seen, PS, that there are several times when persons having gotten one of the cards and they have waited and up and inquired at your ministry that they would have been told that they are supposed to have gone. Somebody went in their name. And we have had a number of those cases where that particular, I've gotten it in my constituency, we have seen it, where persons allegedly have gone into that person's space in the name. So I don't know how would that happen. Is there a time frame also? My colleague spoke about waiting for 3 years, 2 years. Is there a time frame, having gotten and gone through the biometrics and all of those things there? Say, will they get through to go on the plane, say, within a 6 months or a year? Or how long do they wait after all of those things have been done?
The wait, member, is dependent on how many jobs we get. So we may be preparing, so based on the trend over the recent years, we know that each year we will send away just about 1,000 new workers each year. So in preparation for that, we will, as I said before, we will probably pre-screen, do the second stage with maybe 12 or 1,300 workers, because you do have people who the police record is not going to come back clean. The embassies may turn down the visas for a number of reasons. People do not get through, and so we have to do more than what we project, right? So it is difficult for me to tell you that, you know, within 6 months, it really is a factor. Some years ago, you know, employers, even regular employers who took persons, reduced the number of persons they take. But we operate on the premise that we expect that if last year you took 50 workers, you're going to take 50 this year. But, you know, agriculture is seasonal, and sometimes it's a good crop, and sometimes the crop fails, and sometimes we do have employers who cancel. So employer may have taken 50 last year, and this year they're down to 10 because there was a fire. For example, 2 or 3 years ago, when you had a lot of fires in the United States, on the West Coast, it impacted a number of our workers who traveled into that area because the agricultural crops were destroyed. So it is very hard for me to pin down to a specific time. But what we do is try to ensure first in, first out. We may not always get it right? And that's why I'm saying if you have come across instances where we may have somebody through whatever means, I don't know why, may have been missed, to bring it to our attention. But I would want to encourage all the members, if persons come to you and say that they have paid somebody, they're considering doing this, they hear that somebody has traveled in their space, please let us know. We know that there is a lot of misinformation out there, and we want to be able to clarify if it's a misinformation. If it's not misinformation and something is really happening untoward, we need to know so that we can investigate it and ensure that measures are put in place to prevent such things from occurring.
Member Whittle?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry. Can I just... With the biometrics now, persons can't travel in another person's name and space, right? Remember, you know, maybe that could happen 30, 40 years ago, but certainly with the advent of biometrics at the border crossings, that's not so possible anymore.
Okay, yes. I don't think the question about persons traveling in person's name reached a point where at the biometric level, I think what the MPs are saying is that it would have occurred maybe in the selection process.
Sorry, say that again? I'm not...
No. I think what the MPs are trying to say in relation to persons traveling in other person's name. You mentioned about the biometric. I don't think they're speaking to at that stage, but at the preliminary stage where you would have selected somebody, and then there is a shift in the names at that stage. I know it used to happen, but I must admit that, given my personal experience as an MP who is here before my two colleagues, the situation has improved a whole lot in terms of the operations of the ministry. I am aware of situations before, but I believe the situation has improved a whole lot. And my own personal experience, I think I've seen great improvement in terms of the selection process and how it works. One challenge I see, though, is the means of communication in relation to the appointments of candidates to visit for the various selection process. You use cell phones and phone contacts to find the persons. And sometimes what I find is a real challenge is that sometimes some of these persons who complain to the MP really would have gotten a call from the ministry, but the phones might be down, they change numbers and all of that. And that is where I see the major problem. I think going forward we could look at, right, and also given the fact that the MPs are the one who is interested in the issuance of the forms, then if you have challenges in terms of contacting a particular person, then you could refer that situation to the MP for that era and say, well, we have called Mr. Brown, we are not being able to get in touch with him. Could you assist us in finding him? Because I think that is where the problem, because the ministry get the blame when in fact is really a communication problem in terms of finding the person. And that is what I find. But in terms of the whole aspects of the operation, I've seen great improvement. I must commend you for that.
Thank you very much, member. I'm glad that at least one member has noticed the improvements, and we are trying to improve even more. I accept the recommendations that you have made, and we do know that communication is a challenge. Part of the difficulty we have is officers, people don't like to answer phones from private numbers. And unfortunately, the ministry numbers are also private. So we are aware, for example, that that is happening. So what we have done is we have given some of our officers who call the workers cell phones to be able to be calling from a cell phone, so they see the number coming up on the line. We do, when we don't get through to the individual, if you recall, member, on the form we ask for I think it's 2 other contact persons who we can contact if we can't reach you. And we do use that. We're not always successful. One thing that we are working on, and it's something very, very, and I'm going to say very early in the pipeline, is we want to move to an app, because that's where we're going. As I said, we want to take the ministry services to the hands of people. We're moving to develop an app that persons can use certain security features and so forth to be able to get updates, right? When they're to come for their medical, when they're basic information that we communicate via telephone to them. So that is not going to negate us calling the individual. But once we have rolled that out to persons can use that as a backup to continually check, and that's where we're going. What we have found has happened in some instances where people get called is that the farm worker comes back home, and then when we're ready to begin processing them, they are not in Jamaica, meaning they've come home from Canada and they've now gone to visit family in the US, and so they don't get that call. We know that that happens in instances, and it poses a challenge for us in terms of processing. The Canadian High Commission needs a certain lead time to be able to process those visas and things. So, you know, we know that it's not a perfect system, but we're working to streamline and make the process simpler and timelier for the workers.
Yes,
and I agree with you, member, that the MPs can be of a great asset to us. We need to use the MPs more to help us to find the persons when we can't.
Yes, I know Mr. Stewart coming back, but you touched my point was really your last comment. And this is my, first of all, member Witter's comment about the improvements. He may be the one that voiced it, but others do recognize it to another area. So don't feel that your good service is not
well, remember the members need to talk about it more.
Okay, no, well reasonable. But my last point that you made about the role of the MPs, and it's a concern of mine. One of the reasons why the farm work tickets and the selection is so high on the MPs list, because people bombard us about it. One, and two, it's an avenue to alleviate the employment challenges in your respective constituencies. My little beef though, PS, is that yes, we are given these forms to recommend persons, and it kind of cut off there. If I'm given 20 applications for my constituency, and I try to distribute right across the constituency, all the divisions in the constituency get a touch. You wanted not just 20 applicants, but you would want 20 qualified applicants. If I send from my constituency 20 persons and only 10 was able to satisfy the criteria, ask me to send back another 10 to satisfy the 20 competent ones that you need. Because I tried to have done at my constituency some amount of what I call pre-screening, right? One, they are within the age band that the form specify. We ask them to make sure that there's no police record that would disqualify them. All the things, but for some reason, I'll go further. I heard from some of the persons who have gone that one of the pre-screening exercise at the medical, they ask them to hold out their hands. And if their hands look too soft, they kind of automatically just bounce them. And I have the occasion persons come to my constituency and I say, I hear that your hands have to look like you do hard work. Let me see your hands. I'm not screening you out, but from what I hear, if your hand's too soft, you might get disqualified. The point I'm making is that you do try at the constituency level to make sure that all the persons who you recommend can fit the bill to go through, because you want them to get the opportunity that is being availed. But when you bump half of the who I send or a quarter of them, I want you to tell me, MP, 5 of your persons were not qualified for ABC reasons, and send back 5 or send 10 from which you select 5. But I don't want the opportunity to be lost on my constituents.
Well, member, if we were to use that approach, then you would be issued with less forms at the outset. Because the number of forms we issue, we know by experience, because we have been doing it over time. We know that on average, maybe about 30 to 40% of those who are sent to us are not going to meet the grade. And so if we're going to then say, well, if you send 20 for argument's sake, and 10 didn't meet the grade, and you resend and resend until you end up with 20 that meet the grade, then we would have to then probably send you 10, because it means that our pool is going to be so large. You understand what I'm saying? So we have a pool, but our pool is going to be so large, and the concern with moving persons out of the pool. And remember I told you, on average about 1,000 new persons. So if we have a pool of 5,000 for argument's sake, it's going to take us close to 5 years on average to deplete that pool. So do you prefer us doing a pre-selection every other year, or do you prefer us doing it once every 5 years and have people languishing for
the
4 or
honest
5
truth,
years?
You know the honest truth. No, but you know the honest truth, though, Pierce. The question you ask is a reasonable one. But disappointment oftentimes come when an expectation is not met. I have met a number of persons who could see and feel the distress that when they went past the test, so to speak, and they have been waiting for a long time and don't get on. And because of how lucrative the earning opportunity is compared to what they have, some of them even begin to spend the money before they earn it. They begin to make the plans for the addition on the house, the this, the that, and it just don't happen. So you ask the question, which is a reasonable one: how long should they be kept waiting when the prospect of them being called in a short time is not done? I tell people, I rather hurt you with the truth than disappoint you with a lie, than comfort you with a lie. And it's kind of similar. They have this expectation which is just not going to come true in the short order. I don't mind it. Instead of waiting for 1 year, they only wait for 6 months. So they know whether or not it's a real prospect in the know. Disappointment for these people is a hell of a thing, and it's for anybody. So I would want you to reconsider. You talk about 1 year instead of 5 years. I'd rather 6 months instead of 1 year. Personally speaking. Because I see and I feel the level of disappointment on these persons when all their hopes are pinned on the prospect of going on the farm work program.
I hear you, member.
And I think my colleagues do share the similar sentiments. They see it as a kind of scamming thing. Not that you take anything from them, but scamming people have expectation that never come true. It have a tinge of it. And we see too much in national life. These things are announced, but they're real experience. And they become so embarrassed that they don't even want to talk about it.
And remember, one of the reasons persons don't qualify or they're not pre-selected, there's farming and there's farming. So you hear people say, yes, I know how to farm. They used to help their grandmother or they do a little thing. Those persons aren't true farmers. And when they come and they're interviewed, those persons are going to be weeded out. Another big thing that causes persons to be weeded out, being refused a visa. So not because it is Canada, it is any country, and there is information sharing across. So if they feel that I've been refused a visa from the US, but I've not been refused a visa from Canada, and then it is discovered that they tick no, that they've never been refused a visa, but they've in fact been refused a visa, those persons end up being bumped from the prospect. So, every step of the way, there is so you begin with a big number, you pull from that pool, and every stage there's a attrition at the various stages.
Yes, P.S. Chairman.
Just good.
P.S. Last year we received a number of the cards or forms, so to speak.
Yes.
We're now in May. We have not received any since the year started. Are we likely to get any more? Because we get the calls, so we need to find out. Even this morning I got about 6 calls. I don't know if you're able to answer that question. But my other question has to do with the CSME. Some time ago we had some hiccups with our Caribbean brothers and sisters, neighbors, so to speak. What is the status now as we speak in terms of the exchange of work permits within our region?
You mean CSME, not work permits?
CSME.
The exchange in terms of, when you say exchange, I'm trying to understand specifically what you're speaking to.
Persons who are qualified to go and work in other Caribbean territories, and I think we were a little bit more easier in terms of accepting them, and we had some hiccups with our sisters and brothers in other nations?
So there are a number of categories under the CSME that are allowed to move once they have the CSME certificate. Jamaica, we continue to process persons within those categories, meaning process, they apply for the CSME certificate and we issue the certificate. We continue to do that. We as a country have been pushing, interestingly, for the categories for movement to be expanded. So we have been pushing for, interestingly, security guards to be able to move across the region, agricultural workers, and there are three groups that the CARICOM is now looking at in terms of expanding. What's the third one? Agricultural. So the three categories being looked at now is security guards, agricultural workers, and domestic workers to move under the regime.
I'm happy but sad about the security guard inclusion. Happy that there's an opportunity for them, but sad that we are treating them or we are treating them and we're sending a message to other people how they can treat our security guards. That's the bittersweet nature of it. So we have to fix some of these, issues.
Yes, the first part of the question, do you care to respond to it?
What was it?
Be the anticipation of cards for this year.
Remember, those forms that were submitted earlier this year, so they were distributed late last year, I believe at the last sitting of Parliament, if I'm correct, in December before Parliament recessed. The names came to us, the forms were submitted to us only, I believe, in January, sometime in January. Those persons were interviewed in March, between March and April, they were interviewed. So they are in process for if space becomes available for later this year, but it is more likely to be next year than this year. And that is recent, remember, we can't, while I empathize with you and I would love many, many more Jamaicans to travel on the program, it's really a factor of how many jobs we can secure for the workers overseas.
Okay, PS, you can continue.
Is there anything else?
Well, I want to, the work permits. It's an ongoing concern, to put it mildly, about persons who are granted work permit for the simple reason that permit granted to persons who are doing work tasks that for which Jamaicans are competent in are bump those opportunities to the extent that the business, the operation need those skills. I'd love your comment. I see the report and the numbers are there, but numbers are one thing, but how much of those really who are granted really should be so granted. So complaints would come to you, or come to the minister rather.
In terms of work permits?
Yes.
All right. Well, Chairman, we do administer the system of work permits. It's very fluid, and what we will find is that when we issue a work permit to a company, there are instances where we do ask the company that they should have an understudy so that we're not issuing another work permit 2 years and continually issuing work permits. And that's one of the ways we're trying to sort of safeguard the jobs for Jamaicans. There are some work permits that we issue that we recognize in terms of the labor market, the skill set may not be there. And that is where we are working with Heart Trust in terms of ensuring that the skill set is there. What we find that is happening, Chairman, and it's very difficult to control, is that the labor market is free to move. And so when we have discussions, for example, with Heart, and we say, well, we don't want to be giving work permits for tilers to be coming in to be doing these large marble tiles that are, being installed. No. And Heart is, in fact, training persons. But when the companies come, they can't find them. So I figure what we're not sure about is whether or not when they train people locally, that those same persons are using their skill set and moving out of the jurisdiction. But, so there are things like that happening in the labor market. And so it becomes a balancing act for us to try to, while we're protecting, we're also trying to facilitate the businesses and the industries work.
Well, a couple of things come into play, PS. For persons who go to Heart and other training places like that and have certification, when they finish the training, they don't necessarily get jobs immediately. And so they will take whatever other jobs that become available. But nonetheless, they do have the skill, the competence in that area. So some of them might be lost, so to speak, in that they're frittered out into other areas where opportunities are. The second question I would love you to address in regard to the application for work permits. Using the electronic labor exchange, where you have a pool of persons, do you, as a first cut or some cut, second, they ask for 10 people to look through your exchange to see whether or not any of these people are listed in there. So if they ask for tilers, and you go on your exchange, you have 20 tilers. They say, no, I can meet that. You have that right there in your shop to say, I have some Jamaicans who can meet it. And so I will not issue any work permit for tilers because I have these here. And other similar exchange. So you use the data to assist our people who need work rather than just by what the applicant says.
And Chairman, that's what we are beginning to do. So our whole work permit system is being revamped. As a matter of fact, the work permit system is one of the projects that is under the government's modernization program in terms of revamping. And so the new system, I'm going to sort of share with you a vision of where we see it, right? And that's where we're working towards. The new system, right now, our work permit system is heavily paper-based. Application forms come in, they're manually processed. While the information is inputted on a system, right, what comes to us is paper. So where we're moving is we want the applications to come to us electronic. Because when that paper form comes, I have to pay an officer to data enter that information. I would like the applicant on application to complete that application form electronically, do the payment electronically. Then what we're looking at is linking that system now with the electronic labor exchange and also linking with the cross-border system, because there is a role for PICA as well. PICA needs to know who has been issued a work permit, who should be here, who should not be here. We need to know when we're issuing a work permit, for example, that that person is not already in the island. for whatever reason, maybe working, I don't know.
It's part, as you touch about.
So it's part of the whole modernization. It's one of the projects.
I've heard cases, at least 3 cases, where the link between the work permit and the visa is critical, because in order to get the legal stay through PICA, they will do all kind of hoops to get the work permit as a means of justifying their staying here. So it's something that I want.
Right. And we recognize that, which is why the system that we will be developing is going to be linking all of those arms
together.
PICA, the ministry, electronic labor exchange. Right now, Chairman, we are promoting the ELE. We need to get all the persons, or as many persons, registering on the system so that we have a sufficient pool and database to be able to tell an employer we have enough persons on our system, go on our system. And one of the things that we are looking further, where we have a requirement that the companies need to show where they have tried to recruit locally, we are going to be saying to the companies, you need to use our electronic labor exchange, because that's the only way we can prove that you really did try to recruit, where you posted that job and you tried to link persons with those jobs.
Available. Okay. Members, it is now 2 minutes before 1. I think, I know we can't go any further. So we are going to be seeing you again. So whatever incompletion there is, I'm going to advise the substantive chairman, and we could pick up from there when next week comes. So let me use the opportunity, PS, to thank you and your staff for presentation. I might just mention in my MP capacity that I too get good service from your officers as it relates to matters that come up in my constituency. So don't feel that it is not recognized and appreciated. So thanks again to you and your staff and to the Ministry of Finance for being here. So we will see you again next week, Wednesday morning.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Members, someone move for the adjourn. So adjourn.
The corrupt are getting away too often. Help catch them now. Jamaicans must